Welcome to the Becks, a podcast that explores multimedia horror with hosts Becky and Sydney. Join us as we talk about movies, books, video games, music, and much, much more.
Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sydney Rebecca.
And I'm Rebecca Snow.
And we're the Becks. This week we're talking about Annihilation. It's a book that came out in 2014 by Jeff Vandermeer, and then it was adapted into a movie in 2018 starring Natalie Portman.
She's a beautiful woman.
She is very pretty.
Yeah, she is. She's very talented.
She was really perfect for the role of the biologist as well, I will say.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, so let's talk about it.
Okay. Yeah, I hadn't even heard of this, so it was the first for me.
You said that Keegan said that it was his favorite movie?
It's one of his favorites.
One of his favorites?
Lauren had him watch it. When she saw I was watching it, she said, "This is an excellent movie." And then he came downstairs and he's like, "Oh, that's a really good movie." And I said, "You watched it?" And Lauren said, "Yeah, I made him." And he said, "Actually, Mom, it's one of my favorites."
It's definitely a really good movie, and I feel like this is one of the rare instances that this is going to be controversial. It's not a very loyal adaptation in some ways, but the book, it's really hard for me to kind of elucidate on this. The movie isn't a very loyal adaptation, but it does a great job capturing the eeriness and the isolation and the slow descent into madness. It almost does a better job than the book does. I think because in the movie we're allowed to have different perspectives, whereas in the book it's strictly from the biologist's point of view.
Oh, okay.
And you never get insight really into the other characters at all.
Oh.
With the exception of her husband, and that's only because she finds his journal later on.
Oh. Yeah, that would definitely be a whole different take then, if it's just one perspective.
Yeah. She's definitely an unreliable narrator, too, and she acknowledges that several times. She's like, she kind of is singularly affected because she inhales some spores right at the beginning of their exploration into Area X, and that changes everything for her. So, couple things I want to talk about, because I reread the book and you just watched the movie. It's been a couple of years since I've seen the movie, so I kind of just want to explore the differences between the two.
Okay.
So it's 4 women, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I was counting in my head. Make sure I didn't miss somebody.
And they get names in the movie, don't they?
Yeah.
So I wonder if this is just something that they decided to change in the adaptation to make it easier. In the book, they are not given names at all.
Oh, yeah, they all have names. There's the doctor that she's the one heading this expedition up with all women, the team of all women.
She's a psychologist, right?
She is a psychologist, and she is the one that has interviewed everybody else that's gone into the shimmer, is what they call it. Mm. And she feels that she needs to go because nobody's come back except for the husband. Mm. So you find out later what her real reasoning and going in is, but she wants to explore it and see why, since she sent all those people in and no one has returned. And then there's a couple other women, and then the biologist who steps up because she wants to know, because her husband was gone for a year, and so now she needs to have some closure and see what happened to him, where he was, what went on.
Yeah.
And yeah, they all have names, and if I had my phone closer, I would know their names.
That's okay. So so it's just the 4 women in the group in the book as well. There's the biologist, who's the main character, the psychologist, who's the de facto group leader. There's a surveyor who has a military background, and she's in charge of mapping. And
same in the movie, yep. I believe.
And then there's an anthropologist, and she's kind of I don't want to say the weakest link because that sounds kind of unkind, but she has the least amount of mental fortitude out of all four of them, at least in the book.
Okay. I think they're all equal for me in the movie. They all have their own mental issues there. But each one is equal in what they're facing for them. You know?
Yeah.
Everybody's grief, everybody's pain, everybody's trauma is their own. Mm-hmm. So I don't feel like any of them were above the other. They were on a pretty level playing field there when they headed into this.
So I want to talk about the plot a little bit for a second. So the basic premise of this is there is an area that is affected. In the movie, it's called Area X. In the book, it's called Area X. In the film, they call it
The Shimmer.
The Shimmer. And it's kind of cordoned off by the military or the government or whatever. And they send expeditions in to kind of figure out... They're trying to figure out what the origin is, what exactly is going on inside of it.
It started small. It's expanding. They don't know why.
Yeah.
So they're trying to figure out what is going on, where it started, if it's alien, if it's something human-made, if it's biological, if they're just trying to figure it all out and not having a great time doing it.
Yeah. So in the book, it's mentioned that the kind of catastrophe of it was marketed as an ecological catastrophe, and it kind of crept into the daily news. So when it kind of broke, everyone was used to hearing about it, and it wasn't treated as a huge deal. It's been postulated in the novel itself that it was because of military testing, but again, this is all from the viewpoint of the biologist who is given incomplete information about everything that has happened with Area X or the Shimmer. And that's something that each woman in the expedition learns, is that they don't know the whole story, and that's on purpose in the novel. I don't know if... Did it seem like So in the book, it's called The Southern Reach. That's kind of like the military/government aspect that's in charge of Area X. Is it like that in the movie? I can't remember.
There is just a group. They have an outpost there that they are watching it. They are studying it. It's military.
Okay.
But nobody knows about it. It is not common knowledge.
Super secretive.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just the people that they bring in and interview know about it. They don't know where they're going until they've been interviewed and see what they're looking at. The only reason that the biologist ended up here is because her husband appeared back after being gone for a year, and then he went into multi-organ failure. And when they were on their way to the hospital, they were confiscated by military vehicles. You couldn't tell they were military, but probably Secret Service, something like that. And they took him and her, and she woke up in this complex and found out what was going on. And
so in the movie, was he the only person in his expedition that made it out?
He's the only one that ever went in that made it out.
That ever made it out.
Ever.
So in the book, it's a little bit different. So the biologist is part of the 12th expedition, and her husband was a part of the 11th expedition. Now, it isn't that everyone made it out that was sent in with the 11th expedition. It was definitely bigger than the 4-woman group. I don't think it was ever said how many were actually in the entire group, but her husband wasn't the only one that made it out. There were several others that made it out as well.
No, he was the only one, and that's why they were so interested in him and her, because they wanted to know what he had told her, how he seemed, what he had said, if he had contacted her while he was gone, if he had contacted her before, telling her where he was going, anything like that. So, and all those answers were no contact at all. She didn't know. She thought he was dead.
Yeah. So they don't have a very good marriage.
No.
She's kind of a terrible person. She's not... Okay, I guess she's very insular, and I don't want to say... She doesn't really play well with others. Like, she's not against company, but there are several times in the book where she talks about it as, like... She treats everything like it's a new ecosystem to study. So even when she's out with friends, if she goes out with her husband and they're at a bar, she thinks of it as just a different ecosystem that she has to try to...
See, they didn't give a lot of background of that. Pretty much it was just her and a coworker that you see her interacting with for their life before the Shimmer. Mm-hmm. It's very, very limited on what you get in their background. You know that you find out throughout the movie that she was having an affair with the coworker, but you don't know that at first. You see her interacting with him, and he tells her, you know, we'd like to invite you over to a barbecue. Him and his wife, the coworkers, did, and she was just kind of standoffish, and she said, I'm going to paint the bedroom. And he looked at her and said, you know, it's been a year. It's been a year. It's okay. You're not betraying him. And she just said, I'm going to paint the bedroom. So she was very isolated. And that's what she was doing, was painting the bedroom. It goes right into it immediately. She's painting the bedroom, and he walks in and is just standing in the doorway after being gone a year and with no word. So, and then you just get bits and pieces throughout the movie of her life as, you know, the biologist and her coworker. And you see that she was having an affair, but very limited on how she reacted to people outside of their life. So
in the book, when her husband came back, she said that he seemed empty. Like, there were vestiges of his old personality, but it was like the whole time he would make these faces when they were talking, and it was like he was almost remembering that something was important, but he couldn't remember why it was important and what exactly it was. And she just was with him for, it was like an entire day and night, and the next morning when they were eating breakfast, the Southern Reach people came in and grabbed him. Okay. And it wasn't like violent or anything like that. They just took him, and she was allowed to visit him. And after just a couple of days of him being under observation and stuff, that's when they discovered that he had raging cancer, and he only lived for about 6 more months.
Oh, okay.
So he died.
Yeah.
Or whatever was...
Well, he doesn't in the movie. Spoiler alert. No, she was only with him for maybe a few hours in the movie. He was very distant, like dead-eyed, you know, just stared at her. She asked him questions. She was angry with him. Where have you been? What have you been doing? Where did they send you? And he just replied with, I don't know. I don't know. I don't remember. Things like that. And she's like, how could you not remember? And where's the rest of your team? And your, you know, this and that. Mm-hmm. And he had no reply. And then he got sick. And so she called the ambulance, and they were in the ambulance being whisked away because he was like spitting up blood and coughing up blood, and he was very, very ill. And then they knocked her out when they stopped the ambulance and hauled her away and had her locked up. She was allowed to go in and see him because he was in her multi-organ failure. Mm-hmm. So she was allowed to go in and see him before she went into the Shimmer. But yeah.
Yeah, it was more of a drawn out process in the book. She actually called an emergency number that he had left before he went on the expedition. Now, she knew that he was going on an expedition, but she didn't know exactly what it was about. Mm-hmm. He was a medic. He was a field medic. And so she knew that it was he was going on a mission that needed a field medic, but he wasn't able to tell her a lot of information. And he was kind of doing it as like almost a Hail Mary for their marriage. He called her Ghost Bird. That was his nickname for her in the book, because she didn't seem wholly present in their relationship. She loved him, but it was kind of in a distant way.
Yeah.
It wasn't that he was a specimen to her. I don't want it to sound like too weird.
Yeah.
But they loved each other in very, very different ways. Their love languages were not at all compatible. And she talks about how their marriage was failing and stuff like that, even though they still loved and cared about each other in their own ways.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't...
He came to her the day he was leaving, and he said, I have to go early. And she was sleeping, and he had woke her up, and she was laying in bed. And she looked at him, she said, how early? And he just kind of stared off in space, and she said, oh, now. Mm. So he looks at her, and he said, I do love you. But it was weird how he said it, because it wasn't, I do love you. It was just this monochromatic, I do love you. And she just looked at him, and she tried to grab him and hug him, and he just pushed her away and shook his head no and left. Mm. Boom, gone. So you could tell that he knew something, or he was angry, or just maybe he was just done. Yeah. Something there. So I don't know if he was going on this trip into the Shimmer to just get away from it all, or if he was trying to prove something to himself or her.
It becomes obvious early on that all of the women in the group have their own issues. Now, again, the book is literally only from the biologist's point of view, so you don't get to learn what these other issues are. They don't get close with each other. They hardly ever talk about personal things once they're inside. They're there for observation, samples, etc. They're not there for anything else. The biologist is obviously not a very friendly person anyway, so she doesn't really care about making friends. And it seems like pretty much they're all on the same page, but they all got issues. So I do have a question for you. The overall overarching message of the book and the movie, I feel, are a bit different, actually.
Okay.
So in the book, it's clear that it's about climate change and what we're doing to the planet, and this whole area is a last refuge. And towards the end of the book, even the biologist isn't very regretful that it's spreading, because she's, she worked on multiple ecological dig sites and stuff like that, so she knows intimately the effects of climate change and how we're killing the planet. And then she enters this oasis that's just filled to the brim with living things, and it's thriving. And even though there's some things inside of it that are disconcerting and at times very scary, she never really thinks of it at, like, it's all organisms, right? It never comes to her that anything is particularly alien. It's just nature, but just nature that we don't know about yet, right? Mm-hmm. It has less to do with mental health issues and things of that nature. And I mean, it is mentioned, because like I said, the biologist has a very particular type of personality, and her flaws are very apparent throughout the whole book. But it's not really the focus. She's a mouthpiece more than... She's like a mouthpiece or a narrative foil, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Whereas I remember specifically in the movie that there was just a lot about grief and mourning and acceptance, and...
I think there's... For me, I really noticed the leaning towards how we are self-destructive. How it is kind of inbred into us to self-destruct. And yeah, it was kind of disturbing. It was pretty heavy. I didn't realize that it was going to be that kind of movie.
Yeah, I realized after you mentioned it, you're like, nobody warned me. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I probably should have. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, there was a lot there, but it was 100% more towards mental health and dealing with what we do to ourselves or what we put on ourselves and what others kind of throw at us too. So there was a lot to it, yeah. And
so there's this very interesting plot point in the book where the psychologist isn't just there as the leader of the expedition. She's also there to make sure that the girls don't lose their shit. And when they were going through all of their training, which included survivalist training, refreshing on their specific educations, and survivalist weapons training, all of that stuff, they were also getting regularly hypnotized, and they all got trigger words, I guess, is kind of my best approximation to. And the psychologist would use them to either get them to calm down, make sure they didn't argue with her orders.
Really?
So some of it was for their benefit, right? Obviously, if they're panicking and they can't calm down, she would use it to keep them calm. Yeah. But there was more insidious controls that the biologist learned later on, because when she gets exposed to some of the fungal spores, she learns that she's immune to the hypnotic suggestions that were ingrained into her in the training, and she's able to see the effects of it on the other women in their group. Okay. And one of the keywords actually is annihilation.
Really?
And it's meant to make all of the women kill themselves.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Well, that's horrible.
Yeah. It gives a little bit of a different meaning to the end of the movie when the psychologist goes crazy and she starts yelling annihilation at her. She does that in the book as well, but it's because she's freaking out and trying to get the biologist to kill herself. Pretty messed up.
That is.
So when they first enter the Shimmer or Area X, at least in the book, everything is pretty normal. They see the things that they expect to see. They see lots of vegetation, bugs. They see deer and other animals that live in the forest, deer, raccoons, different species of birds, otters. There's evidence of bears, all this stuff. One of the first really scary and odd things that they run into is this giant wild boar.
Okay.
So they find the old... It's kind of like the base camp that serves as everyone's base camp when they first come in as an expedition. So it was made by Expedition 0, and every expedition since then has used it as their base camp. And they hear it. They hear like its feet pounding, and then they see it, and it starts way, way far away. And it's running towards them, and it's obviously getting bigger and bigger. And it takes so long for it to get close to them that the anthropologist starts laughing because it's kind of absurd. Like, it's a very dangerous animal, and they only are given one assault rifle, which the surveyor has because of her military background. Mm-hmm. And they have a couple of handguns, but that's only supposed to be in, like, dire emergencies. But it gets close to them, and it veers away. It's acting like it's going to rush towards them, mm-hmm. and then it veers away, and it kind of lets out this horrible, like, screaming moan. And when it passes by, the biologist thinks that its eye looks very similar to a human eye.
Oh. Yeah, see, none of that in the movie. And there were 5 women. I was wrong. There were 5. Yeah. Oh, mouth noise. There were 5, and when they first get in there, they wake up and they don't know how long they've been there. Mm. They're completely disoriented. They figure from their rations that they've been there probably 3 or 4 days, but they don't know how they got where they were, and so they were really disoriented, and it was creepy. So they took off walking. They figured if they got to the coast, they could go to the lighthouse where it first started, mm-hmm. and where it spread from. Or if they needed to leave, they could follow the coast to get to the perimeter and leave. Mm-hmm. So they find this house in the middle of the swamp, and they're like, oh, a house, they're all excited, and they go running in, and one of the girls gets grabbed by something in the water, because the house was immersed in water, half of it was. And
yeah, it was like a very swampy area, wasn't it?
And she gets pulled into the water, so... Natalie Portman's character, Lena, goes in and rescues her because whatever's grabbing her is grabbing her pack that she's got on, and they all have guns. Every one of them has an assault rifle. So she gets her out of the water, and they get out of the house, and they're walking around. They're like, what was it? And she said, I don't know. Something was in the water, and you can hear it thrashing around in the house, and then it comes out, and it is a giant gator. Like, giant. I can't even explain how big. And it attacks them. Mm. And
was there anything, like, unusual about it?
Yes.
So besides its enormous size.
Yeah.
should
Lena shoots it, which they didn't know that she had all this training, but she was military background, too. She shoots it multiple times, just like opens that AR up and is shooting this thing, and they see that it's developing multiple rows of teeth, so kind of like a shark. Ooh. Yeah, it was, yeah.
So did creepy. She kill it?
She killed it.
She did kill it.
Yes.
So then they were able to look at the corpse.
So then they were they opened its mouth and were looking at the teeth and everything. And they had noticed before going into the house that flowers and stuff were developing. They were mutating. They were beautiful. It was gorgeous. They were mutating, and they were creating like extra petals and things like that they were noticing. And then she said it's just like the plants, they're developing extra rows of teeth. So, yeah.
So it's interesting. You said that they just woke up and didn't know how they got there. In the book, they actually had to be hypnotized in order to cross the border calmly.
Oh, okay.
Allegedly. Like, that's what they were told. Mm-hmm. Who knows if that's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because this organization that set this all up is very... It's kind of shady. I don't know why anyone would trust it at all ever, but,
Yeah, no.
Like, all these expeditions have come in, and very few have ever come out.
Yeah.
So everyone kind of is at least semi-aware of what they're getting into before they enter it, because they're allowed to watch video interviews of the people before they went in and the survivors of like the 11th expedition. They're able to see the very fruitless interviews that they have from those survivors there. So the lighthouse is in the book, but so is, there's like this thing that the biologist refers to as a tower, which is funny, and she even says that it's interesting because she's the only character that refers to it as a tower. Everyone else refers to it as a tunnel, because it isn't a tower out of the ground like a lighthouse. It goes into the ground. It tunnels into the ground. Okay. But she cannot help but think of it as a tower for some reason. And it's not on any of their maps. Oh. So for the surveyor especially, it's very unsettling because there have been so many other expeditions and it's really close to where they camp. Oh. And they decide to go down and they decide to explore it, and they start to see weird things on the wall. And when they get closer to it and they shine the light on it, because it's really dark, it's underground, they realize that it's words, but it's words that are written in vegetation. It's like moss that is... And the words are really creepy. It's all like... It all sounds very biblical. Okay. But not in a nice Jesus parable, in a like end of the world Revelations shit.
Oh, that sounds pleasant.
And they realize the further down they go into the tunnel, the tower, that the words start to appear fresh. They start to appear like they're fresher. Like they've just been written.
That's creepy.
But it's like a vegetation or like a moss or whatever. But it looks like it's being currently written. So they know that something
is there
deeper down is writing words. Well, the biologist gets a face full of the spores, like I alluded to earlier. And she doesn't tell anybody. Oh. She's just like, I don't know what's up with these words. We should go. And she just, in the book, she like I said, she doesn't tell anybody. She's kind of watching herself to see if it's changing her. And she's like, I knew that a lot of species of spores, like fungal or otherwise, they can take months to incubate. But still, I was convinced that I was fine and that if there were no symptoms, it was all fine. But she did say that if they were to explore the tunnel some more, that they should bring breathing masks with them. Now, it's funny, you mentioned that they all had assault weapons and stuff like that. There was a point in the book made that none of their equipment could be new. They weren't allowed phones, laptops, anything high-tech. All of their guns were put together from old parts. The guns that were locked away for emergency use. And, like, we're talking locked, like 3 or 4 security locks on the little package that held the handguns. They were like revolvers, old-style revolvers. The newest equipment was probably their microscopes, but even those were just, like, basic ones that you could get at high school.
They had high-tech stuff when they first went in, but none of it worked. And the psychologist was like, are you surprised how many have come in and we've heard nothing? So... yeah, but they did have guns, and they did end up at the military base in there, like the base camp that had been run when it was first starting. That's where they ended up, and things got bad from there.
So my favorite part of Annihilation is the bear. I love the bear. It's not in the book. Very sad.
It's not?
Well, it might be in the book, and I say that because there's something that chases the biologist that is very similar to what was interpreted on screen as the bear, but it's not a one-to-one. Brilliantly done, though. Brilliant. Super good. I know you loved it. I love the look on your face that you're giving.
No, I didn't. Because they are all staying. They decided to stay up because they found the video in there. They found
the video from her husband's
expedition, which none of the rest of the women know that her husband had been in there. They have no idea They thought he died, so they didn't know anything. And they find a video that says for those to come, and they watch it, and he's cutting open another man's stomach. And inside...
What was inside? I can't even remember.
Well, it looks like the intestines when you first see it, but they're moving. They're moving like giant worms. And it's just horrible, horrible, horrible. So the women were like, I don't want to stay in there. I don't want to stay in there. And so they went up in the guard tower, and that's where they were staying. And then one person was down in the field in a guard shack, and they were waiting there. And that was actually a psychologist. And Lena... Natalie Portman's character, she woke up, she couldn't sleep. She was looking at things in the microscope and, trying to figure out what was going on. So she went down, and the psychologist said, well, you're not supposed to relieve me till 3. And she said, well, I'm done sleeping for the night, so here I am. Well, then they heard something in the field, which it was a tall grass. And
it's always tall grass.
Yeah. And by this time, they could hear things going on, the girls up in the guard tower. So they came down, too. And I think the girl's name was Shepherd. She was the first one to make it down to Lena and the psychologist. And she's like, what's going on? And they were kind of standing in the guard shack, and Shepherd was outside of it. They just simply said, we hear something, but we can't see it. So they're looking, and all of a sudden, she just gets grabbed by this bear and hauled away. And they scream for her, and she's screaming. You can hear her screaming, and then it just stops. And so, yeah, they were all pretty shook up.
So she died.
Well, they didn't know. Lena went looking for her the next day. She said, I can't leave. I have to know. So she went looking for her. And yes, she found her. Her throat had been bit out, basically. And she was dead. And she came back and reported she's gone. And yeah.
So we'll return to the bear in a minute.
Ugh.
So they decide to go back to camp after they ascend out of the tunnel, the tower, and they kind of discuss their next steps. So it's not really a democracy. The psychologist kind of has final say, but they're all made to feel like their opinions are important. Classic psychologist shit.
Yeah.
And because they all want to make their way to the lighthouse, because it's like you said, that's kind of the place that all of other expeditions were kind of obsessed with.
Yeah, supposedly where it started growing from, so...
Yeah, it was never stated that explicitly in the book. There was a little bit more mystery about it. But regardless, that it was like the lighthouse was the place to go. That was their not their end goal, but their ultimate goal current. This is when the biologist learns that she is totally immune to the suggestive hypnosis, because the psychologist just says these certain words and everyone kind of goes slack-jawed, and she mimics it because she's smart. And the psychologist just said, you're all going to sleep well and have no nightmares. You're going to wake up feeling refreshed and confident in our decision to move on towards the lighthouse tomorrow, all this shit. And everyone just moves off to bed. When she's done, she like snaps her fingers and they all snap out of it and they all just go to bed. And
wouldn't that be nice?
When they wake up the next morning, the anthropologist is missing.
Oh.
And the other girls are obviously quite concerned about this. The biologist is suspicious. She said that she just didn't trust the psychologist. There was something about the psychologist that she never trusted. She always felt like her little smiles were cruel, or they had double meaning behind them or whatever. Yeah. So she was kind of automatically suspicious. Yeah. Not that the psychologist had done something, just that the psychologist wasn't being totally forthcoming. So when the biologist and the surveyor asked the psychologist, like, what the fuck? The psychologist just says she couldn't hack it. Like I said, she wasn't the strongest mentally. So a psychologist is just like, she decided to go back to the perimeter to get extracted. And we're just going to carry on without her. But the biologist noticed that there's something wrong with the psychologist. Like, she was limping like she had been injured.
Oh.
They actually decide to go back down into the tower again, and the psychologist stays behind, ostensibly because she wants to guard the entrance and make sure nothing comes in behind them. So they have their gas masks on, and before they go down, the psychologist does some more hypnosis, though. She says some words, and she tells them that the tower is just a tower. It's just made of stone. There's nothing unusual about it, like whatever. Suggestion doesn't work on the biologist, obviously, and she realizes that the deeper into the tunnel they go, the more it seems like it's a living thing, and the tower walls seem to be breathing. And she can see all sorts of shit. But she realizes that she can't tell the surveyor any of this because the surveyor's going to think she's crazy because she still just sees a stone tower.
Okay.
And she's also the only one with the assault rifle.
There you go. Yeah, in the movie, when they're in the compound, before they saw the bear, after they saw the video of the guy being disemboweled with the moving things inside of him, they find in the pool this organic plant thing on the wall that had engulfed that man. And so it kind of looked like a flower with a half body.
I remember that. It was quite beautiful, but in a grotesque way.
Yeah, it's really disturbing.
It's like it either assimilated him or remade him or something, which is a common theme in this movie.
And they do also state there's one scene where they're canoeing through the water after the gator before they get to the compound, where the girl that's with Lena Shepherd, the one that gets eaten by the bear, she actually says, well, we all have our own thing. She said, I see you're wearing a locket. She said husband, brother, dad, and she said husband. And Lena told her their husband died and killed in action. And she said, oh, I lost my daughter. She died of, I believe it was cancer. And then she said, that one up there, why do you think she wears long sleeves? Because she has scars that she doesn't want you to see. And so she kind of listed everybody had something. So you kind of knew there was something going on with everybody. So, yeah.
So, the biologist is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place because she's seeing these changes the deeper and deeper they go into the tunnel. And she's not able to mention them herself because she doesn't know if it's something that the surveyor can also see.
Or,
yeah. But eventually the surveyor does start to mention, like, see some things. For example, the writing on the walls keeps looking like it's fresher and fresher. There's like a slime on the floor that the biologist automatically is like, oh, it's kind of like what snails
leave behind.
Yeah. And eventually they reach this landing is kind of the wrong word, but it's like an open space, and they find the anthropologist.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is she alive?
No.
Okay.
No, she actually looks like she's been, bits and pieces of her look like they've been like burnt and boiled off.
Ugh,
and there's
horrible.
Test samples all around her. And the biologist is like, oh my God, she ran into whatever is making the words.
Ugh. That's no good.
Yeah, not good at all. The surveyor immediately wants to bail out. And the biologist is like, let me grab her abandoned samples and then we can go back up. And it's on the way back up that the biologist kind of owns up to the fact that she doesn't say that she's been contaminated, but she does say that for whatever reason she is not affected by the hypnosis, and that the psychologist has like these trigger words that she can use at any time, and nobody's like the wiser. And the surveyor gets pissed off. She kind of has an anger problem that the biologist notices very early on, and it's something that's pretty present throughout the rest of the book. She's just like, why should I trust you? You were quiet about the hypnosis stuff before, like, why are you owning up to it now? I don't trust you. The fucking anthropologist is dead. And the biologist is like, yeah, and she told us that she fucking left. There's obviously something not right about this. They get to the top of the tunnel and the psychologist is gone.
Oh, no.
Gone. She's gone. And so the biologist is like, she ran off. We can't trust her. Everything that she's ever told us, everything is in suspect. Why wasn't this tower on the map? All this stuff.
Yeah.
And there's surveyors like, I can't deal with this right now. Let's just go back to camp and look at the samples. They took a bunch of pictures, too, of the words on the wall. And they were going to get them developed. But they had like so at the Oddities Fest, when she did the quick develop underneath the tent, they had very basic stuff like that. Because, again, nothing was high-tech here. So they go back, they're looking at all of the test samples, the biologist doesn't sleep, Neither of them do. And the surveyor said that, you know, none of the pictures turned out. They're all just like rainbow flashes of light. And when she looks at one test sample in particular that the anthropologist had managed to get before whatever it was attacked her, it's human brain tissue. Ah. But it's not hers, like the anthropologist.
Yeah.
It's something that she grabbed from
wherever,
the thing that attacked her. So again, this is like the biologist is like a dog with a bone. She wants to go back into the tower. The surveyor thinks she's fucking crazy. She's ready to bail out. She wants to go back to the extraction point, but the problem is they don't know where the psychologist is, and she trashed their camp too. Like she. Mm-hmm. Took a bunch of the supplies, took the rest of the guns. So she's out there, she's armed, she has a bunch of their equipment, and they have no idea where she went. It kind of just goes downhill from there.
Yeah, see, a couple of the girls get skittish and they don't want to... Well, they end up getting to a house. They find a house and they decide they're going to stay there. And they start walking around and looking, and there's like these plants growing that look like humans. Mm. They're plants with flowers, and they're beautiful. And they figure out that it's refracting whatever it's doing, taking the DNA, it's changing the human DNA into what it needs to basically survive or whatever. So they're all freaked out. The one girl, she is really getting upset and she wants to go back. And they're like, you can go back if you want, but where do we go back to? We have a 6-day trip this way, or we have a 2-day trip this way. I think I'm going to do this and get to the coast and go. And she's like, are you sure? And she said, yeah. So Lena goes to sleep. And when she goes to sleep, the one girl gets up in the night and she all of a sudden is standing above Lena with the gun in her face. And she's like, what? And she has her locket with the picture of the husband.
And she recognizes
the husband as the guy that cut open the other guy that they watched. Mm-hmm. So her name was Anya. Anya is, you can tell she's getting a little out of control. She's scared. She doesn't want to be there. She needs to get out. So Anya and Tessa are the two remaining, and they're just Tessa's kind of scared, and she wants to go back, but she just doesn't know what to do. So Anya, gets them all and has them all tied up. Now she's mad. She trusts no one. Mm-hmm. She thinks they all knew that she had the husband and this and that. And she's really losing her grasp on reality at this point. So, yeah, things happen. So things go downhill pretty quick here.
The bear shows up again.
Oh, but it's horrendous.
Oh, it's so good.
The bear is, rotting. He's missing skin and just there's bone in his face, and he's just scary looking. But when he starts to growl, he's actually screaming in Shepard's voice. Help me. Ugh.
It's one of the most disturbing, chilling scenes in any horror movie ever. It's so good. It literally uses its past victims' screams to try to draw other prey in.
Yes, to make them react.
But the thing that I like about it is that I still always felt like, and this was just the impression I got, I always still felt that it was still just an animal. It was a changed animal, but it didn't feel like it was anything malicious about it.
It was a changed animal. No, I don't know. I do believe that...
You think it was malicious?
Well, the way it would walk up and use that voice right in their faces to try and get them to react, to try and get them to
sure, but
pull them into that I don't know. Yeah, for me it was no. And the thing is that the other 3 women were all tied up. Mm. There was only the one woman who thought everybody was out to get everybody. She had the gun and she tried to save them, but...
She didn't succeed.
No. And after they got free and Anya was killed, Josie and Lena were sitting outside, and Josie said, can you imagine? She said part of her DNA, part of Shepard's DNA became part of the bear.
Yeah.
And she said, can you imagine that in your last moments, that fear, that terror that you felt, that's all that remains of you? And that's like so crushing to think of that.
Yeah.
And so she walks off and she said, I'm not going to do that. And she becomes one of the plants.
Yeah.
She just gives in. She just quits. And the psychologist, she had already decided to take off. So she was going to the lighthouse. That's all there was to it. So then it was just Lena. And the next thing you see her just sobbing.
Yeah.
Because the reality of what just happened was pretty intense. So yeah, Josie gave up. She quit. She was going to go out her own way. She wasn't going to allow it to change her.
There was
or for her to be left with that terror.
There was something quite beautiful about how she turned into one of the plant things. It was very sad. It actually, didn't it start from her self-harm scars too? Mm-hmm. I feel like I remember that like
as
in my head.
she started to walk away, the flowers started to sprout out of her scars. And yeah, so oof, that was sad.
So at this point in the book, the surveyor really doesn't trust the biologist. And the biologist is like, we need to go after the psychologist. We need to go to the lighthouse and, maybe it'll all make sense there. But the surveyor's like, no, I don't want to do that. And the biologist tries to use
The hypnotism?
Oh
my goodness.
But it doesn't work. And then the surveyor's like, fuck you. I'm not going anywhere with you. I don't trust you. You can go your damn self. Because the thing is where they are, they're in like a wooded area, and then there's like a marshy area, and then it's like a wide open salt field that eventually leads to the beach and where the lighthouse is. But the thing is that with such a wide open space and the window in the lighthouse, the surveyor's like, that's the perfect place to fucking shoot us. Because there's no cover for so long.
Right out in the open there, yeah.
She's like, yeah, I'm not doing it. So the surveyor stays there. The biologist does say that she's gonna come back. Like, she means to come back, and then they can leave. And nothing shoots her on the way. She gets to the lighthouse, and she finds there's it's obvious that there was a bloody battle that happened there. There's shorn up defensive walls and stuff that are surrounding the lighthouse, but they're facing the sea like they were trying to stop something from coming out of the ocean. And someone had rappelled down the lighthouse and like fastened shards of glass to the side of the lighthouse so nothing could like climb up it. So there was like this weird...
Yeah, see, there were just crystals, very large crystals protruding from the sand, like tall, stories tall. It's probably nearly as tall as the lighthouse. And then there were skeletons just lined up like they were guarding the lighthouse or something. That's all there was there. She just walked right into the lighthouse. No big deal. Lena did.
No big deal.
She was looking for the doctor, the psychologist. And she just walked right in, and then it gets even more creepy.
Yeah. So she gets to the top part of the lighthouse, like where the actual light bulb is for the lighthouse. And there's evidence that the psychologist had been there. Like, it looks like a lived-in area. And she finds this picture where she, like, automatically just knows that it's the lighthouse keeper. It's a really old picture, but his face has been circled for some reason. She also finds a trap door underneath a rug, and when she opens it, it's filled with expedition journals.
Oh.
And the biologist is like, there's way more journals here than just 12 expeditions.
Crazy.
And that's when it throws even more doubt on the whole thing. Because it's like years and years. She said she doesn't like mention any actual dates or anything. Because the book itself is dateless. But she said that the dates in some of the journals don't make any sense. And she knows, too. Because, like, obviously the really deep ones are just, they're really old. Some of them are even rotting. That's how old they are.
Oh.
And the closer she gets to the top, the more recent they've become. So she realizes that her husband's journal is going to be somewhere in here. And that's something that she's going to have to face eventually. She does find it and she grabs it, but she doesn't read it yet. But she's looking for clues about the words in the tower. to try to find out what the origin is. And she realizes that she has to go back into the tower to try to figure out what the actual organism is that killed the anthropologist. And before she does that, though, she finds the psychologist. She jumped off the top of the lighthouse and tried to kill herself. She didn't succeed, though.
Oh, well, that's not good.
She was real broken, and as soon as the biologist touches her, she screams awake, and she says, "Annihilation, annihilation, annihilation." She's trying to get the biologist to kill herself, which is something that she learns when she actually reads the psychologist's journal.
Oh, no.
But it doesn't work. And,
well, yeah, because she's immune to it, thank goodness.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
And the biologist is like, "You could have shot me. You know, why didn't you?" And she's like, "Oh, something was stopping me from shooting you." And she's like, "But I did see you coming. You were like a bright flame." And throughout the book, the biologist starts talking about how she feels change happening within her. Like, she doesn't know if it's physical or if it's just whatever, but she feels herself start to become part of Area X in some way. Because of the spores? Maybe. I remember the end of this movie went kind of off the rails batshit.
Yeah, it goes... So she gets into the lighthouse and she finds a video camera, and she watches it, and it's her husband sitting... Well, first she finds this dead body that looks like it's been burned, just sitting on the floor in the lighthouse. And so she starts watching the video, and it's him talking to the camera, and he's saying how he's losing it, how he can't think straight, how he just can't deal with it anymore. He just needs to end it. And he has a grenade. What kind is it? It explodes him. That's all I know.
Yeah,
like, it's a flash.
I know what you're talking about.
It's like on the tip of my tongue. Phosphorus.
Phosphorus, yeah.
Yes. So he has a phosphorus grenade in his hand, and he just pulls the pin, and poof. But before he does it, he says, if you find Lena, if you get out of here and you find... Please go find Lena. And you hear a man's voice say, "I will." But it's his voice. Literally. And he walks around the camera, this other being, and it's Kane. It's her husband. It looks just like him. And he just shuts the camera off. And she's watching this video, and she's freaking out. And then in the lighthouse is a tunnel down just in the wall, and she can hear the psychologist's voice. She's just talking. And so she goes down in there and she starts talking to her. And you have, it switches back to this man in a mask, like they're in a chamber. She has come back, and it scans back, and he's asking her all these questions. She's like, "I don't know. What do you want from me?" He said, "Well, it's awful funny that there were all of you, and now there's just you. You're the only one that came back. Don't you think that's strange?" And asking her these questions, she said, "Well, maybe I was the only one that had something to come back for." And he just looks at her because they're interrogating her. So she goes down into this. Oh, she said something about the psychologist. And he said, "Well, doctor wasn't coming back. She had cancer. She never planned on coming back." So she had terminal cancer. And that's why she wanted to go into the Shimmer, because she knew she could go there and not have to face what she was having to face. She goes down in the tunnel. She finds the psychologist. She gives her this whole spiel about things and how wonderful thing. I can't tell you word for word. But then she explodes into this ray of light. Just pure light gone. While then it scans Delina standing there, and there's like this pulsating flower of light in this tunnel that she's in. And she's staring at it. You can see she's mesmerized by it. And in fact, she starts to bleed. And those 2 drops of blood go into that. And all of a sudden, this being is created. And it looks alien, very alien. She freaks out. She grabs the gun and she shoots it multiple times. When she shoots it, the bullets go through it, and like tentacles are created out the back of this. So she runs up and gets out of the tunnel and is back in the lighthouse, and it follows her. And she decides she's going to fight it, and she hits it. And it's mimicking everything she's doing. So you're kind of getting the impression that this is her. You know, at first you see the husband, and he has this counterpart with him, this doppelganger, this whatever. And so she hits it, but it hits her much harder. And she ends up on the floor, just like passed out. She was knocked out. And right before she goes to wake up, this bean, it crawls down on the floor next to her and lays down just like she's laying down. And so she gets up and she tries to run out the door, and it basically just lays on top of her and pushes her into the door. And you can see the fear in her eyes, and this weight is just crushing on her. It's super emotional. I can't even explain it. This is a movie that has to be watched to experience all of this, because there's so much to it. It's a much deeper film than just a horror movie. And I'm sure it can be interpreted in many other ways. This, for me, was 100% everything that she felt. Her guilt for the marriage, her guilt for the affair. It was pressing on her so hard. So she escapes from it and grabs one of the grenades that is, just phosphorus grenades laying in this little hole in the lighthouse. And they do a little dance, basically, mimicking each other. And she hands it to her bean that starts to turn into her. Mm-hmm. And she pulls the pin and runs, and the bean explodes. And then she's back being questioned by these people.
Definitely feels very symbolic.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It's just... Yeah, I didn't expect it to be a whole bunch of psychological things. I love psychology. You know that. Mm-hmm. Went to school for psychology. Should have finished my psychology degree, but there's reasons I didn't. Psychologists can be a little quirky, and I was afraid of that, and I just ended up quirky anyway, so whatever. She's there, and they question her, and her husband is still alive. So they take her in to see him, and she walks in and she says, "You're not Cain, are you?" And he said, "No, I don't think so." And they hug, and his eyes flash like this weird color. Mm-hmm. And
hers do the same. Yeah.
Just telling you that whatever they survived, they're just not who they once were.
Yeah.
So it's pretty amazing. I think it was a great way to handle it. And like I said, there may be other interpretations. People might not see it as mental illness, but for me, it really hit home. I lost a very good friend 6 years ago to the day that I watched this movie, to suicide, which I don't think they were portraying suicide. I think they were more portraying like the self-destructive that we all have when we're sad, when we're angry with ourselves, when we feel guilt. We kind of tend to beat ourselves down.
Yeah.
So it hit pretty close to home that night. It was like, oh, okay. Yeah. But again, there could be different interpretations. So how does your book end?
She doesn't get out. Well,
oh, she doesn't?
Well, I don't know for sure, because so there's
more mystery, not just like everything wrapped up in a bow like this movie.
No, this is actually the book is actually part of a series.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't pick up like the biologist's story ends at the end of the first book, I'm pretty sure. I haven't read the other novels, but I've got, like, from the synopsis and stuff that I've read, it continues on with different expeditions, and you learn more about. So
people are still going into the.
Oh yeah, it doesn't stop just because they die.
See, this place was destroyed. Basically, it just they leave it as kind of it was fixed, and they don't know why, and there you go. Because when the bean imploded, it took the whole shimmer with it, apparently.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't...
Yeah, no. Ah, good.
No.
Yeah, see, this one wrapped everything up and was like, there you go.
It's pretty
They're different.
It's pretty tidy, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the thing, right? The biologist talks a lot about how she keeps returning to the fact that something returned, someone returned. You know, it was like her husband and not like her husband. And it took them a really long time to realize, I mean, like a full 24 to 36 hours to realize that the expedition was no longer inside Area X, but instead they had just returned to their homes. And
so weird.
Exactly. So she keeps thinking, okay, it was so effortless for them to re-enter. And, you know, we all kind of thought that something was wrong with our loved ones, whatever, when they came back. But what is truly to stop other things from leaving? And it's stuff that we wouldn't notice. Like a squirrel here, a raccoon here, a dragonfly here. So she's kind of already thinking, not only is she... So if we're thinking of it as like taking sides, It's not that she's taking the side of Area X, it's just that she feels to an extent that it's inevitable.
Okay.
It keeps growing, and she doesn't see how change is a bad thing, especially considering how terrible we treat the Earth.
Yeah,
anyway,
for
right?
sure. Yeah.
So she goes back. She goes all the way down to the bottom of the tunnel. She comes across what she refers to as the Crawler, which is the being that attacked and killed the anthropologist, and actually attacked the psychologist as well.
Oh.
That's
after she jumped off the...
No, she was always injured.
Oh.
From it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had said she was injured. Yep.
And she, like, the Crawler had, like, grabbed the psychologist's shoulder and it turned her arm into moss.
Oh.
Like, squishy moss. Like, she couldn't use her arm. Like, it was totally useless towards the end. And, yeah, it was overtaking her. She died quite horribly, actually.
That's awful.
When she comes across the Crawler, though, she doesn't disturb it in any way. She just observes it, and she sees it creating the words. And she kind of gets the sense that, oh, this is why they weren't letting us bring in more sophisticated equipment, because they were scared of whatever was inside Area X learning.
Oh.
And because she gets the impression that this thing is she's not sure if it has, like, a symbiotic relationship with the tower, because the tower itself is alive, too. Remember, like, we talked about how it was breathing or whatever? Super strange. I definitely recommend reading the book, too. It's a wild ride.
Yeah.
But at some point, the Crawler turns its attention to her, and it doesn't attack her, but she experiences the full weight of its regard. It's very... We've talked a little bit about cosmic horror before. Mm-hmm. It's like she gets torn apart by its attention on her. Whatever is inside her that's making her a part of Area X is the only thing that saves her.
That's crazy.
It's really hard to explain, but
yeah,
it's super painful. She feels like she's being torn apart and put back together again, and, you know, all this stuff. And it learns all it needs to learn from her and turns away and keeps writing its words. And it's like she wasn't that important to it after all.
Yeah.
So
as long as she didn't threaten it.
Exactly. It didn't seem malicious in any way. It was just very other.
Yeah. See, I do feel the bear was a little malicious because it was using their fear, their friend's voice, and maybe not. Maybe it was just the DNA that it absorbed. But
I mean, is it...
I don't know. It's terrifying.
Well,
the bear is terrifying. And if you watch this movie for any other thing, just watch the bear scene. You can even look it up, I'm sure, on YouTube. It's disturbing. That is the one part of the movie that just made me go, everything else I can handle. But that was disturbing.
So she does go back to the surveyor, but the surveyor actually shoots her.
Oh, no.
And she ends up killing the surveyor. She's able to... She kind of has... It's not that she has, like... She has superpowers or anything stupid like that, but her senses are all enhanced and stuff, so she's able to sneak around more effectively, and she shoots the surveyor in the head. Oh. And she finds the surveyor's journal, and it doesn't really have much in it. Like, she wasn't even mapping the area like she was supposed to. She actually drew places that she cared about outside of Area X.
Oh. So she was preoccupied.
Yeah, and the only thing that she wrote in there towards the end, it said, the anthropologist tried to come back too, but I took care of her. Oh. But the anthropologist is dead. Oh. So, yeah. So when she saw the biologist, the surveyor, I think, thought that the biologist had been killed too, and that it was... Because remember, the surveyor saw the horrific evidence of the anthropologist's body. Yeah. So she was done taking any chances. And the biologist said that, you know, she wasn't sure if, like, what kind of religion she was part of or anything, but instead of burying her, she puts her in the salt marsh. One other thing I want to mention was when they first set up their base camp, every night, and this is what I was talking about, like how the bear wasn't really in the book. Mm-hmm. Every night they heard this low moaning sound come across the reeds of the marshes. Hmm. And it wasn't like sustained, so it would come and go. It was just this really eerie moaning sound. And one of the nights, one of the first nights that they were there, they actually drank a couple of beers and kind of loosened up a little bit, and they started mocking the noise. Like, they
People
moaned
are
back.
dumb.
And then the moaning kind of got angry. Like, it didn't get close to them, but it took kind of like an angry tone.
Oh.
And they're like, okay, let's not do that anymore. So when she was making her way back from the lighthouse to go back to the surveyor so they could leave together, it was getting dark, and she realized that she wasn't going to make it back to the camp before it got fully dark. And when she was going through the reeds, she realized that she could feel something following her, and that the moaning was getting closer and closer.
Oh, boy.
And it started to sound excited, and she never got a glimpse of whatever it was. She was able to get away. She was able to run from it and make it to the edge of... It was like it was bound in just that area.
Oh, okay.
The reeded area. It didn't come close. She also mentioned that when there was like a river canal that led up to the area where, like, it was like a river into the ocean, kind of like a canal.
Yeah.
There were dolphins that jumped out of the water, and one of the dolphins looked like it had a human eye that she
creepy.
Could recognize.
Oh.
So she does, at this point, she does actually open her husband's journal, and she realizes that instead of them all being, because they were supposed to be clinical journals meant to just talk about what they were doing while they were in Area X. It wasn't supposed to be like, it wasn't like a diary, okay? Mm-hmm. They were all addressed to her.
Oh.
And when he first enters the area, he talks about how much he thought that she would love it and how cool everything was. And then later on, when things started to go wrong, because a bunch of them in his expedition ended up killing each other in the lighthouse, he's like, I'm going to grab a boat and I'm going to go out in the ocean, and I'm going to go as far as I can and try to find my way out of here. And that's when his journal ended. And the end of the book is her deciding to follow in his footsteps to try and find him. Hmm. But at this point, she's fully changed, so the surveyor does actually manage to shoot her. And she realizes that the being hurt is actually kind of staving off her transformation into whatever
she's going to be.
Yeah. And so she actually kind of considers harming herself continually to try to stay human, but then she just kind of is like, what's the point?
Crazy.
It's kind of bleak, but
I guess.
It does still kind of end on a hopeful thing, because it's not... This is the hardest part for me, is that even at the end, she didn't really seem like she was looking for her husband. It was more that she was looking for answers.
Yeah.
So she was going after her husband, going after his footsteps or whatever, but it still wasn't really about them or their marriage.
Yeah, I see. I think the movie was more about, like, the guilt she felt and how their marriage had imploded and they had self-destructed, and how they were both very changed from the situation that they went through, and how other people gave in to the depths of their psychosis or their despair or grief.
Yeah.
So, which is everyday life. It's horrible. We've all lived it. We've lost people we love, and we've made some pretty bad mistakes. I'm sure everybody always does. So
I am completely mistakeless.
I know you are. Perfect little angel.
Yes. Innocent.
Yes. So, yeah.
This is a great movie. It's actually one of my favorite sci-fi movies.
I really enjoyed it. I had never seen it before. I had no idea. But it was really good. I did enjoy it a lot. Like I said, it hit home a little bit. So
it's got good ratings. Better than I expected, because I do feel like it's kind of art house filmy at times.
Yeah.
It's definitely not what I would call like mainstream horror or mainstream sci-fi. It's got its own special flavor. The book is also really, really good. It definitely has a bleaker tone, and the characters are way less likable. Like, I'm serious. Like, you don't ever root for the biologist. You're like, wow, this lady kind of sucks. The only reason why you are with her during this book is because it's literally the narrative is told.
She is the one that's telling the story.
Yeah. And otherwise you're just like, wow. And it's like, how much of it is just her personality and how much of it is whatever it is changing her. Yeah. Right? So it's just a very interesting. I actually was quite happy with how the book ended. I'm okay with unanswered questions and stuff. I know some people are not. They like
Some
to have...
things should have unanswered questions. You're not meant to know everything. Depends on what it is.
There is an excellent foreword, actually, at the beginning of the novel. And usually I don't know if this is like a cardinal sin, but I usually skip forewords because I don't give a fuck what other people think about the book. I just want to read the book. However, I did read this one because I knew that we were doing an episode on it, so I wanted to kind of go into it like research-minded, I suppose, is one way of putting it. And the foreword is actually super good.
Oh, nice.
So I do. I recommend. I recommend it all. What are we going to talk about next? What do you want to talk about next, Becky?
I don't know. I think I have to figure that out. We have a couple episodes that we're going to be doing that we have the info for. So
yeah,
pretty excited about that.
And it's going to be spooky season soon.
Yes, it is.
We have to do something special for like October. We have to think of like a theme or something. We'll do.
Yeah, so if anybody has some suggestions on what you'd like to hear, see, whatever, let us know. Did get some exciting news. We've been invited to the Crossroads Village Curiosities and Oddities Festival next year.
Which we just, again, if you guys remember, we just visited to go to, like, as just
to see what was up.
Yeah.
And we've been invited back as presenters.
So we're going to be presenting there next year.
Super exciting.
Next June.
And whoever gave our name for that, thank you. We appreciate that.
She didn't say exactly who it was, so we're not sure, but you're a real MVP, whoever you are. We love you.
Yes. So that's exciting. We did do our behind-the-scenes tour at Erebus, so that episode will be coming up.
Yep. We just have to edit a bunch of audio, and I'm actually going to be purchasing tickets to go to the actual haunted attraction and get the pants scared off me. So
yes.
I'm excited about that too.
I'm not going only because I've had 3 back surgeries, and when we even spoke to the owner of Erebus, they kind of looked at me and said, yeah, probably not where you want to be. So, because I don't want to get hit in the back and end up not happy or not walking, one or the other. But I'll get Sydney's input on it. I may go just to watch the making of the monster. They have a pretty cool film.
Yeah.
And that would be cool too. So some things there that we're excited about. We did get to go to a really super cool
Curiosities
Museum, and we'll be talking about that too. People there are awesome. So we're doing some things.
We got some stuff planned. We're going to be going to a museum in Saginaw.
Yep, Saginaw, Michigan. We're going to go there.
And do some other spooky things as spooky season opens up more opportunities for us to do so.
Yeah, so fun.
Today the pod, tomorrow the world. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sydney Rebecca.
And I'm Rebecca Snow.
And we're the Becks.